Thank you everyone for joining the Olmstead Implementation Office for our Lunch and Learn event today. My name is Chloe Ulf, and I am the Communications Specialist with the Olmstead Implementation Office. And I use she, her pronouns. As a brief physical description of myself, I am a young white woman with shoulder-length, wavy brown hair, and I am wearing a red sweater sitting in my living room. We can advance to the next slide, please, Maddie. Just as a few housekeeping things today, we do have ASL available. You can pin the ASL interpreter by going to her name, Alicia ASL Interpreter, and selecting pin or spotlight so that you can make sure that she is on your screen at all times today. We also have captions available. You can access the captions by clicking the CC closed caption button at the bottom of your screen. And we will also put a link in the chat in just a moment if you would like to view those captions offsite. And just as a few ground rules today, we will have time at the end for your questions. So if you do have any questions throughout the presentation today, you can put them into chat, and we will do our best to get to those questions at the end of the presentation. And we did receive a couple of questions during the registration process. So we will make sure if you did ask a question during registration, we will get to that today. But again, if anything else pops up during the presentation, feel free to pop it into chat, and we will get to that at the end. We also are recording this event today, and we will make the recording of the event available after the event. So you will receive that recording next week if you want to rewatch it or share it. With that, knowing that this is a public event that's being recorded, please do not share any personal contact information in the chat during the event today. And please stay on mute just to make sure that everyone can hear our presenters and that there are no background distractions. Next slide, please, Maddie. Wonderful. So now I am happy to present our two presenters for today, talking about the E1MN Employment First Initiative Partnership. We have Amanda Jensen-Stahl, who is the Manager of Interagency Partnerships and Business Engagement with the Vocational Rehabilitation Services, VRS, with DEED, Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development. And we also have joining us today, Ryan Mers, who is an employment coordinator with the Disabilities Services Division of DHS, the Minnesota Department of Human Services. So I will turn it over to both of you so that we can learn more about what the E1MN partnership is. Thanks.
Oh, awesome. Thank you so much, Chloe, for that introduction, and good afternoon, everyone. This is Ryan. I'm a middle-aged white male. I've got glasses, and I'm in my home office. For those of you that are looking at my screen, looking at my picture, I apologize. The lighting gets really hard this time of day, so it's hard to get out of the shadow and into the light. But really excited to be here today and that you've joined us for this Lunch and Learn session on E1MN. Amanda and I are super glad to be here and presenting the information. If we can go to the next slide, Maddie, I'll start with a quick overview of what we're hoping to go over and cover today, and then I'm going to pass it over to Amanda, who can introduce herself and bring the first section of our presentation forward. So our goal for this 1 hour we have in the afternoon is to introduce you all to the E1MN partnership and share some of the work that we've been doing across state agencies under this partnership to advance employment first outcomes in Minnesota. So we want to give that high level grounding and a little bit of what that's looked like. In order to present that information, I got an agenda up on the screen here, and we thought we'd structure it around a set of questions that you might have around E1MN. And the first question is, why is a state partnership needed? So why do we have to be working together, and why is this work important? Second is, what is E1MN? When we talk about this acronym, what is that partnership and what does it mean? Third is, what has E1MN accomplished? So what have we done so far? And then the next is, what is ahead for E1MN and what is ahead for this work? And then our last section is around, what does that mean for me? So this is really for those of you who are people with disabilities, maybe accessing one of our programs, or family members with loved ones who are looking at employment. This section really touches on what to take away from today for yourself. And then finally, we'll be leaving some time at the end for questions. I think we have until 1 o'clock today if we need it. We were sort of planning on like 15 minutes or so for questions, but we will. So if you have questions during the presentation, put them in the chat, and then we'll go through and address them at the end in that time we've got available. That's our overview for today and what we have ahead of us. And so now I'm going to pass it over to Amanda for that first question on why a state partnership is needed. Next slide, and Amanda.
Thank you, Ryan. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. My name is Amanda Jensen-Stahl, and as was stated earlier, I work for Vocational Rehabilitation Services, usually referred to as VRS. I use she, her pronouns, and a visual description. I am a white woman with blonde, straight hair. I'm wearing glasses. I've got a plaid button-up shirt, and then I have a virtual background. It's October, which is National Disability Employment Awareness Month, and so my background is celebrating that. So really happy to be here to be talking about E1MN. And to get us started, I'll talk a little bit here about why it's needed. Thank you for the next slide. So a couple of reasons why and how E1MN came to be is that employment support for people on waivers span across multiple state agencies. And so in that introduction, I work for the Department of Employment and Economic Development, and we have VRS services as well as state services for the blind, SSB. Ryan works at DHS, and they administer the waiver programs. And then we also have our colleagues and partners over at MDE, the Minnesota Department of Education and Special Education Services. And so historically, our agencies have not been as coordinated and aligned as they could be. The next bullet talks about we each have federal guidance that really sets responsibilities for each of our programs. And so we have to work within that framework. And then we also have Minnesota's Olmstead plan that really calls on our state agencies to work together. And we have shared employment goals that drive that work. And then Minnesota's Employment First policy really grounds us in those shared priorities. And at the end of the day, we all agree that we want to do better for the people that we serve. And so really figuring out how do we coordinate at the state level, some of that kind of behind the scenes work for the individuals that we serve. Next slide, please. And this just continues with our motivation for doing this work, that again, because services can get complicated, because it crosses multiple agencies and different funding sources, we recognize that it can get very complicated. And so E1MN, part of what we're trying to do is really coordinate and bring things together to help make the system make more sense. Next slide. So we're going to talk a little bit, if you're not familiar, about what is E1MN. Next slide. So this is if anyone has seen us do an E1MN presentation before, this is sort of our, one of the hits. This really highlights our state agency partnership. So E1MN is that state agency partnership advancing employment first. And it includes, as I said before, the Minnesota Department of Human Services, the Minnesota Department of Education, and the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development. And this visual here, a bunch of kind of swirling arrows that come together to one point, is to really work, it's about us working together to deliver a more seamless and timely employment support system. So you'll hear us say this probably many, many times, is that we really want to keep the person at the center. And it's about us figuring out things behind the scenes so that people get the services they need when they need it. Next slide. This slide shows the E1MN logo and arrows kind of going around it. And it highlights our vision that our systems, aligning our systems so that our common customers, so again, you know, crossing these multiple funding sources, multiple agencies, that people get seamless and timely supports to make informed choices and meet their competitive integrated employment goals, and that we have developed shared values and principles that helps us guide our work. And so we're working together off of the same shared values. We're working off of the same, you know, sharing the same songbook. And so really making sure that that we, you know, employment is first and foremost, and that E1MN is not necessarily a new service or a new program, if you will, or not even a project, but it's really a new way of thinking and working together for all of us at the state level and the local level to really make things, again, you know, it's about that person and really trying to make things work for the person, which makes that's at the end of the day, that's our goal. And so as you know, for those of you in the audience, when you see this E1MN logo, what you can take away is that you know that it signifies that the state agencies are working together, that it's shared messaging, it's shared agreements, shared training. And so again, it's trying to have that coordinated system. Next slide, please. So highlighting some of our key strategies, we really we've been working on, and we continue to work on, how do we plan and improve those coordinated services and employment first approaches? How do we remove barriers and confusion, making it easier for people to navigate the system? Again, recognizing that it's complicated, it's been complicated, and how do we kind of break down some of those complications? How do we work with local and culturally specific partners to improve access and equity? And how do we support each other and bring out the best that our agencies have to offer? And then provide coordinated communication. So again, it's really trying to make sure that any training, any communication, that it's coming from a coordinated effort, that you're not getting one message over here and then something else over here. It's really the same information at the same time. Next slide. So some of the areas of work that we've been focusing on is around that service sequencing, around clarifying who does what, when, and a lot of that becomes, again, for the professionals and for those of us at the policy and the state level, really clarifying, okay, whose role, who's paying, you know, we've got multiple funding sources, and trying to make that as clear as possible so there isn't any confusion or argument at the local field level. That referral process and customer flow, again, for our professionals, making sure that we have shared processes to make those transitions between programs as smooth as possible and knowing kind of who does what when. Provider alignment we're trying to increase our shared pool of service providers across the waiver 245D system, as well as the VRS and SSB system. And then training and communication, again, joint communication, joint trainings, and making sure that we're all hearing the same information at the same time. And then tools and resources, making sure that there are tools and resources available to help all of our professionals really live into this work and have what they need to carry this out. And it's about how do we make this complicated, complex interagency work more person-centered. So again, really putting the person at the center, and then how do the professionals, how do we then kind of support that person and coordinate behind the scenes so that the person is getting the services they need. Next slide. Okay, so what has E1MN accomplished? So just a little bit of grounding for those of you that might not be familiar. E1MN and our kind of formal interagency collaboration launched about, it's been not quite a year and a half, but it launched July 1st of 2021. And so when we think about, we're in end of October 2022. And so we're just over a year into this work and really looking at, especially this first year, as kind of our baseline year, and so wanted to highlight some of the things that we've accomplished that we built ahead of kind of formally launching this work, and then the work that's occurred within the last year, different trainings, tools, resources, engagement, and regional collaboration. So the next slide, some of you may have seen this. Again, this is something that we tend to share at almost every presentation we do on E1MN. So this is what we put together that's called the Engage, Plan, Find, Keep framework. And it's a visual around, a couple slides ago, I talked about the importance of us figuring out how do we sequence services. And so if you're someone on a waiver who is wanting to work, how do the services support you in your employment journey? And so this is again, for any individuals or families out there, a lot of this work that we've been doing is really focused at the professional level. Again, kind of figuring out the things behind the scenes so that we can be more coordinated and better serve individuals. And so this really helps our field staff, our professionals across the various programs understand kind of who does what when, including the funding source to support someone, and really looking at how do we make sure that wherever somebody's at in their employment journey, that then we just match the services based on their need, whether it's funded by the waiver or whether that's funded by VRS or SSB. So it's two different funding sources. But again, it's about making sure that that person has what they need to move forward. So if they're in more of that planning stage around kind of deciding preliminary employment goals, kind of developing some of those things needed to springboard into their job search, or whether they're in that job search, making sure that it's really behind the scenes that we've got that figured out. So again, that person is just getting the services they need when they need it. And so you can see here, and it's not meant to be, you have to do A before B before C. It's meant to be flexible. People kind of come in again, wherever they're at. But you can see here, the engage phase is really at the early stages of somebody who might be thinking about competitive integrated employment. and maybe just like they're not entirely sure at this point. And so these services can help somebody make that informed choice about employment, really helping think through some of those barriers and concerns that somebody might have, their previous experiences, where they're at today, and then just kind of weighing those risks and benefits of choice. And that would be funded by the waiver. The plan phase is that phase where somebody is like, yeah, I really want competitive integrated employment, but perhaps I need a little bit more helping me kind of decide what that might look like. Maybe it's been a while since I've worked. Maybe I've never worked and I have some ideas. And so this plan phase really helps someone tease out some of those preliminary employment goals, things like informational interviews and job shadowing, and putting together a resume, doing some mock interviewing, all those things that kind of build that framework and build that foundation for the job search. And again, that would be funded by the waiver. Now here's where we switch and we have that transition. So those job search services are now going to be provided by VRS or SSB, and that's the job search to help somebody find competitive integrated employment. Once somebody finds a job, if they need those long-term supports, then it transitions to KEEP for someone to receive those services long-term, and then that would transition back to the waiver. So it's that framework that helps outline again how our services work together across the systems and kind of gives that visual. And again, this is like a very high level overview. And then if you look at the next slide, this will talk about students. So the slide before is adults. Here you see the same framework geared towards students. We define students as being in school. Adults would be out of school. And so you can see here, it's the same concept, but you have schools added to the funding. So you can see it's a little bit different if we're talking about somebody who is in school. Next slide, please. Other things that I want to highlight are we have spent a lot of time building trainings, tools, and resources for support professionals. So at this time, it's been really gearing it towards the people who are doing this work out in the field across the state. And so you can see some of the different trainings that we've done, webinars, different tools that we've built that are on the Disability Hub website, and then other resources like frequently asked questions. And we did lots of coffee chats where we answered well over 100 questions that we built into our FAQ that also lives on the website. So really trying to do a variety of things to support professionals to help arm them with, how do we live into this work? How do we collaborate? How do services work across the different systems? Next slide, please. So here is we just wanted to highlight the work toolkit, which is on the Disability Hub website. And there's a visual of a computer screen that kind of shows the homepage of the Disability Hub work toolkit. Lots of training for both adult and youth, and lots of resources and tools. If we had more time today, we would, kind of maybe show you some of the different tools and resources, but there's a lot out there, and we really encourage people that are professionals to take a look, because there's a lot of again, just material tools that'll help kind of guide this work and help you really be able to do this work. The next slide highlights another tool on the Disability Hub website. So again, we've got a computer screen here highlighting the My Vault web landing page, the homepage. This is a tool that anyone can use to create an account. It's free and it's secure, and it's a way for people to store their documents. So things like, I made a resume, I can store that in my vault. I have my support plan, I can store that in my vault. things like employment portfolios or other tools that you may be doing throughout your, employment journey. It's a way to store those documents. And then that way, as you may have new team members join your team, you can securely share those and be able to manage those over time. So it's a really great tool. There's really fantastic training on My Vault if you're curious. And just hearing from a lot of my colleagues who have started using it, they love it. It's really easy to do and very easy to use. The next slide highlights resources that are available for individuals and families. And again, we have the computer screen that shows the homepage of the site, and just wanted to highlight the parent and family supports that are out there, as well as resources for individuals that might still be in school or adults. So again, just a lot of resources have been built to support this that people can access on their own time. When you need it, you can go back to it and take a look at what's available. The next slide highlights the local area collaboration. We live in a big state with a lot of counties, a lot of vocational rehabilitation service offices, and a lot of employment service providers. And so we have spent a lot of time figuring out how do we get good collaboration happening at the local level. And so we have developed key contacts at VRS offices across the state, as well as every lead agency or county. So we're calling them employment liaisons. Sometimes you'll hear them called E1MN liaisons, individuals that have that additional kind of training, knowledge, and expertise around what is E1MN and this interagency collaboration. We held regional collaboration meetings last year across the state with the counties, with VR offices, and employment service providers. And we had 700 people participate across the state. So thinking about ways to kind of bring together in the various parts of the state to talk through how do we work together. Again, a lot of this is really emphasizing the collaboration amongst professionals and how do we do our work and do things behind the scenes so that it's as seamless and timely for the individuals who are seeking employment services. And then technical assistance, just being available to answer questions, provide additional guidance and training. As we've been doing this work, of course, questions come up and things that, well, how does this work? And I've got this situation. So we've been doing a lot of that. And then finally, encouraging more providers to become dually enrolled so that they can work across the two different funding sources. And then just encouraging, again, we live in a very big state and we know that there's parts of the state that we could use more providers. So also, how do we bring in new providers and culturally specific providers? And the next slide is just to highlight a little bit of success in Carver County. So again, every county is a little different in how they come together and the collaboration, but we wanted to highlight Carver County. So they started having regular E1MN meetings. They recognize that this is, while it's not different work, it is a different way of coming together and collaborating across the funding streams. And so really thinking about, okay, VR and waiver case managers working together more closely than ever before, and the importance of like, hey, we gotta just get to know each other and just be talking and working through questions and issues that come up. And so one thing that they said before having these regular meetings that, it was more of a transactional relationship, more of a, hey, here you go. And, that was about it. However, after these meetings started, this is a direct quote, Since the collaboration meetings earlier in the year, the relationship between VRS and Carver County has developed stronger ties and more regular communication regarding common clients and goals. And that this is resulting in, the county and VR and providers working closer, working more collaboratively, and frankly, working better together. And that is making the services that individuals are receiving, that has a trickle down effect. People are getting the services they need when they need it and moving forward in their employment goals. So now I'm going to hand it to Ryan to take over from here on what's ahead.
Great, thanks, Amanda. So hi again, everyone. This is Ryan, and I'm going to take our next section, which is looking ahead for E1MN and sort of what's coming next. But maybe before I jump into that, just a quick note on or comment on some of what Amanda shared is really it's from my perspective as a state employee and working in this policy area, the level of involvement, engagement across agencies in coordinating those supports is inspiring from a professional perspective, and to see it grounded in this, how do we make this work better for people, and how do we improve people's experiences so they just get the supports they need when they need them, and all the funding and all that stuff is cleaner and easier for professionals. So that's really great. And then, as Amanda shared in that last slide, that looking at local area collaboration and parts of the state that have really embraced it and strengthened those partnerships and grounded those partnerships and that shared value and what we want to be able to support people with. To that, as we get a little over a year into it, that's like super inspiring, right? To see that happening and seeing areas that are taking the E1MN mantle and just running with it and kind of living into that vision. So a lot of great work in what's been accomplished so far. Now, so that was my little commentary because it was a good section. Now I want to talk about looking ahead. And for this section, there's 4 things that we want to highlight or bring to the Lunch and Learn session today. The first is to talk about some of the work we're doing around youth in transition and building out our guidance and tools for students who are graduating and entering the workforce or the adult world. Second is talk about some work we're doing in improving our data and understanding of employment outcomes across the agency. So really improving our ability to understand what's happening in the state and the impact of our different efforts. And then 3 is continued work in creating efficiencies in our processes and our requirements across programs. And then finally, I'll talk about our continued work in building training and resources. So that's the mini agenda for this section. If we can go to the next slide. Thank you. I'd like to talk about that youth in transition work. Amanda mentioned in July of 2021 that we really launched our partnership and put a lot of focus on coordinating supports for people who are receiving waiver services and building out that engage, plan, find, keep framework. As we've continued that work, one area that is really, we see a lot ahead for this next year is in aligning our understanding and our resources around youth in transition. So we know that for students who are getting ready to leave school and enter the work world, it's just this really critical time and this such important time to help people set their career paths or enter into competitive employment or get into school or higher education or whatever their goal is. It's sort of this critical life phase. And so part of the work that we have ahead of us is going to be promoting and sharing our youth in transition toolkit and framework. So over the past year, we've gotten together and built a youth in transition framework that really takes it takes that same approach of who should be doing what when and what does a successful transition what should be happening as part of transition supports to set students up for success. And it builds that into a framework, sort of a common framework across the state. We just published that framework on the Disability Hub website. And so we're really excited that we now, I think really kind of for the first time in Minnesota, we have this statewide shared understanding of like, hey, here's what a high quality transition looks like. And here's what should be happening as part of that towards employment. So we have that framework up, and we're really excited about it and building out its use and understanding across professionals. And then second is when we published that framework, we also published a Disability Hub Youth and Transition Toolkit. So this is a toolkit to support professionals. Again, it's a lot of resources that are dedicated towards school staff, waiver case managers, VRS or SSB staff, pre-employment transition services and providers. So this toolkit kind of sits alongside the framework to provide resources and supports for professionals in living into it. And then thirdly, something that we'll have coming up this year is publishing some videos on youth with disabilities and employment. And this is really around building that belief and that understanding that people, regardless of their disability, can be competitively employed, and helping to build that understanding and that vision for people of what that can look like. And so I think they're pretty well produced videos from what I understand, and I'm really excited to see them come out and get published. But that'll be another resource that we have that you can look forward to in this coming year. And then fourth on here is our employment capacity building cohort. The ECBC it's actually an Olmstead. I think it was set up as to meet our Olmstead goals as one of our Olmstead employment goals. And it's led by our three agencies, and the Department of Education brings together school staff, county or waiver lead agency staff, as well as VRS and SSB, to kind of have local area collaborations around, again, improving transition supports and helping students progress and reach their employment goals. And so the ECBC for the 6 years that it's been running, it's focused on different themes in each year. And one thing we're really excited about for this year is that the ECBC, there's those school district teams are going to be piloting the framework and the toolkit as part of their work. So we've kind of done a soft launch of the framework and toolkit. We have it up, it's published. You can check it out, but we haven't really done a lot of publication or promotion of it. First, we're taking this time with the ECBC to figure out, hey, what works? How do things, what's the best way to present this or talk about these resources? And so we're looking at this next year with the ECBC as an opportunity to, one, make those resources available to these school district teams that are doing awesome work, and then two, learn from that in our work about how we can use this framework and toolkit. So a lot of great work going on right now and coming ahead for the next year around youth and transition. We also have a E1MN youth professional listserv that's linked in the slides here that you can sign up for, which is I think it's typically like maybe an email every week or 2 weeks, maybe every 2 weeks that typically comes out through it, but it provides resources and updates about what's happening around our youth E1MN youth work. So signing up for that is a great resource or a great way to stay up to date. And then a final note before I switch to the next slide. In response, all of these items are really in response to what we've heard over the years around hearing kind of confusion or different practices that are happening in different parts of the state. And with E1MN, part of our hope, and especially from like an equity lens, is to really build a common understanding about what should be happening when and different across the state, so that we don't kind of have different areas that have different interpretations of who should be doing what when. So all this work is so important in building that shared understanding. If we can go to the next slide. Another really exciting piece of work that we have coming out for this next year, and hopefully within the next, I don't know, hopefully maybe before the end of the year, I think is our work plan goal here, is to publish a youth employment outcomes dashboard. The goal of this dashboard is really to collect the information and the data that we have available from the state administrative end about what employment outcomes look like for youth with disabilities in Minnesota, or transition age young adults with disabilities in Minnesota, and make that information available so that, one, from the policy lens, we can understand a little bit more what's happening across the state. And then secondly, for school staff or waiver case managers or providers, for professionals in an area to understand, hey, what impact are we having, or what does this look like in my part of the state? And then, as well as finally, just to build out accountability and transparency across our employment support system to understand what's happening in our state for youth with disabilities and their path. So this youth employment outcomes dashboard is going to present employment outcome information for transition age youth. It compiles information from the Department of Education, from the Department of Employment and Economic Development, from DHS, and really looks across each of these individual data sources. Is there something that we can learn, and what can we share about that information? And it presents it on a regional basis, as well as being filterable, or you can look at race and ethnicity within that data, so we can, again, get a little bit of that equity lens in that work and understand how our outcomes look across populations. So on the slide here, there is a screenshot of the draft dashboard. The words are certainly too small to read. It's more of to give sort of visual representation of it's going to be a dashboard with a regional depiction of Minnesota, areas to filter by race and ethnicity, and then some of the E1MN branding and information behind it. So you can look ahead for that youth employment outcomes dashboard. On the next slide is a little bit more, is another part of our work in aligning our evaluation or monitoring and measuring of our efforts. And we're going to be, right now, we are establishing a baseline measure for our E1MN efforts to look at employment outcomes and participation in vocational rehabilitation services and state services for the blind for people who are receiving Medicaid waiver services, so those HCBS waiver services. And this is actually an Olmstead, it's part of our Olmstead goals. And so on the screen up here, we have the language that's part of our Olmstead plan, which is that we will be establishing a baseline for the first year of E1MN. We're going to be using state fiscal year 2022 data, which is basically July 2021 through June 30th of 2022. So the most recent June, up to the most recent June, and then a year passed. But that really, we worked on improving our data as we launched E1MN and making sure that we could track what was happening as far as services across individuals. And so we're putting that together, getting it over to the Olmstead Subcabinet, and we're really excited to have that lens into our work and to be able to have a baseline that we can look and see, hey, what's happening right now? And as we do this work, what is happening in the future? So that baseline is going to include the number of people who are served by vocational rehabilitation services and state services for the blind who have a Medicaid waiver, the number of people receiving who are receiving waivers who also get competitive integrated employment with the assistance of VRS and SSB, and then looking at those numbers by age as well as race and ethnicity. So this will be an important baseline for us to have in identifying our goals and moving forward with E1MN. Next slide. All right, and then another area of work that I'm really excited about that's ahead for E1MN is really trying to create efficiencies within our systems and our different programs. As Amanda mentioned earlier, this can all seem like really a lot of information. It can seem complicated. You start hearing system efficiencies. What does that mean? But the center of these efforts is really making things work better for people. They get the supports they need when they need them, and the administrative burden or the differences, the complications, the hoops across that are as minimal as we can make them, and that they're as effective as possible in helping people get competitive employment. So really that's the intent of this system work. And right now we're really in we're in that engage phase or that exploration phase where we're looking at and getting ideas of like, hey, what are things that make it difficult for seamless and timely transition? What are ways that we can make it easier for providers to be enrolled in both of our programs? What are things that don't make sense? When are we duplicating what we're asking people and they're having to repeat themselves? Like, how can we avoid those sort of inefficiencies and make things just work a little bit better to have seamless services? So we're in an exploration phase with it right now, but we're gathering some feedback and looking at how we align our program requirements, avoid duplication, and build that seamlessness. I think some of our next steps with this work is really developing our plan out more for what we want to do with some of this ad hoc feedback that we're getting, and then having a clear vision for a more structured approach to the work where we, I think like work plan, really thinking about what has to happen when and understanding it. All right, next slide. And then as a final note here is that we will continue our existing work. So just because we did training before, or we've done technical assistance before, and as Amanda mentioned, those things don't fall off of our radar, or they don't fall off of the work that we're doing. We're continuing to build training resources. We're going to have some really great videos for professionals on the work toolkit coming out. We're continuing to build out that youth and transition toolkit. Amanda and I are doing a lot of technical assistance when something comes up. We have that E1MN request form so that professionals can reach out to us and say, hey, we don't understand how to do this together. And then we can step in and help provide some of that support from the state agency level in doing that. And then finally, collaboration continues to be a theme and something we build in our work, and understanding that it's something that we nurture and we build with all the work that we're doing. And so we don't want to lose sight of continuing the work that we've done. All right, if we can go to the next slide. I know we're getting a little bit low on time, and we have at least 2 questions, I believe, that I've seen. So I want to make sure we have time to address them. This next section is, what does E1MN mean for me? If we can go to the next slide. There we go. So a lot of this work, a lot of what we've shared today are resources that are targeted at employment support professionals, special education teachers, waiver case managers, employment service providers. And really the E1MN partnership is focused on aligning the policy and the programs with a lens to the professional as equipping them with resources. But if you're someone who is receiving waiver services, or you're a person with disability who is interested in employment, or you're a family member, what does E1MN mean for you? We just wanted to give a nod to that and really try to emphasize what we're hoping that people can take away from the presentation today. And the 3 things that we think of here is, first, that whether or not you receive waiver services, employment supports are available. If you want competitive employment, and if you want to pursue a job through voc rehab, through schools, or through DHS and waiver services, employment supports are available to help you at each of those phases: the engage, plan, find, keep. So you can get ongoing supports to maintain employment, get supports to look for a job, and so to really reach into employment goals and understand that it's a priority for our public programs to support people in employment. And then second is to expect collaboration between your support professionals and to ask for it. So a lot of our E1MN work is, we don't want to be bouncing people between programs or saying, this isn't us, you just go over there and goodbye, but really is having an employment team around you who can help support you through engage, plan, find, keep, or through the different phases on your path to employment. And so to look for that collaboration. And then finally is to understand that from the state agency level, we're going to continue to work on integrating and improving our services. And so, this isn't kind of like a flash in the pan thing. E1MN was 2021. It's something that we're really trying to live into and continue to build our work towards our shared commitments and make our programs work better together. Next slide. So last slide for our formal presentation today, and this is just some resources that we think might be helpful and that we've mentioned here today. So the first is that Disability Hub MN, the resources for families, great place to check out and get resources from the person or the family level around employment. Second is a link to the work toolkit on the Disability Hub. Again, really targeted towards professionals, but a lot of great resources there. We have our overall E1MN website linked in the third bullet. And then finally, My Vault is a wonderful tool to securely store and share important documents or plans that you have across support professionals. So those are our resources. I think I got one more. I got a chat sent over to me privately that was asking, how do we get signed up for the listserv that you mentioned? So that E1MN youth, that E1 Youth Professionals listserv, it is linked in the PowerPoint slides. And I believe Chloe can correct me, but those slides will be available either via email or on the website for this page. And if it's not, we can certainly get the link out to share, or maybe we could put it directly in the chat, Amanda, if we've got it somewhere. I can try to pull it up with Word.
Yes, and this is Chloe. We will send that link out in the email that you will receive after the event. So we will make sure that you have all of these resource links that were mentioned today.
Okay, great. Now, I got one question that we received with registration that we want to make sure that we address today for questions. The question was, how do you work with and accommodate people who are interested in work, but might not be able to work competitively and need a job coach for support? So for this question, I really want to start with just saying, working in a business with support, so with a job coach or with other supports like a PCA support, that's competitive employment. We all need different types of supports at our job. I know I lean on my coworkers for a lot, and they lean on me for other things, and a lot of people need supports, and so getting a job coach and that's competitive employment, and some of those supports can be really important. So as far as how do we accommodate and work with people who are interested in it, I think that engage, plan, find, keep framework kind of outlines what happens when. From the waiver end, we help people engage in employment, think about informed choices, develop their career plan and their path, and have some of that job shadowing and experiences, and VR helps people find the jobs. And then on the waiver end, we provide the ongoing supports to help people who are receiving waiver services maintain and succeed in employment, to keep that employment and succeed on it. Amanda, anything else to add for that question we got in registration?
I don't think so, Ryan. I think you did a really nice job answering that. Thanks.
All right. And then we've got some questions in chat, and Amanda, some of these came to me directly, so I'll have to read them out. I know we're short on time, so anything we don't get to today, I'll copy over and we can get information out about. One question was, have we connected with the Minnesota Disability Law Center on the Youth and Transition Toolkit? They recently produced an Into Adulthood guide that brings together resources for youth. That is an awesome suggestion. Somebody linked it. I've seen quickly that resource that DLC put together, and I remember being really impressed by it. I don't know how much the team that did the youth and transition toolkit built it off that or worked with it, but it's a wonderful suggestion and one that we'll bring back. So that's a good note. Another question that I've got is tracking employment outcomes good? But it's a little bit general. What plans do we have to get more like granular data or information, the number of hours, where they work? You know, the dashboard might not get to that really detailed level. And so that's a really great question. And it's something that we work with at the state level. There's a lot of considerations around what do we have available. And then privacy considerations for people are also really important. When we start getting really detailed information, it can create things that are personally identifiable, where we can identify individual people, and that's not information that we can share or kind of puts people's privacy at risk. So I think maybe just a quick response to this is like, we definitely share that vision and wanting to have really actionable data that we can use to guide our efforts and make that available. And it's something we continue to work towards, but it's not easy. There's a lot of considerations in moving towards that direction. Another quick question. I know we're coming up on the hour. Amanda, if you got to just interrupt me. But another question we got is, will the baseline info include age, race, and ethnicity? Oh, include disability type along with age, race, and ethnicity. And so the answer to that one is no. The distinction for the E1MN baseline, what I shared, is it's for people receiving waiver services, and then age, and then race and ethnicity. Disability type wasn't specified in there, but I think that's again, a valuable note to take back for our continued data efforts, is to like look at, hey, what are considerations for people with different types of disabilities, and what does it look like? So just because it's not in that formal measure right now, it doesn't mean it isn't something we can look at and explore and include in our data. Amanda, anything? We're at 12:59. I want to give us some closing time. I think I've gotten through the questions that I could get through in the list I had. I see a couple more that maybe we'll take offline and see if we can get some information to respond. But is there anything from your end that you want to make sure we also cover today?
No, I think that's it. I did not get any questions directly. So, but yes, anything that is still remaining, we'll take a look at and see if we can, you know, figure out a different way to respond. So thank you. All
right, great. Then I think I'll close this out by number one, thanking everyone again for the time this afternoon. Can feel kind of, you know, system-y, E1MN and what we're doing, but we really think it's valuable work, and we really hope it's been useful information for you all. Two is to let you know to stay connected to what we're doing at the state level in our E1MN efforts. Check out the Disability Hub and the Work Toolkit and sign up for the listservs. That listserv we shared are great ways to stay connected to this work. And then in closing is just to say, I think on the last slide has Amanda and I's contact information. So, you know, you can reach out and all that stuff. And I think that's closing. Sorry, I'm not a great closer, Amanda, as far as wrapping it all up, but thanks for the time here today, and have a good rest of your day in advancing the plan.
Thank you, everyone. We appreciate you attending. Thanks a lot.